Good evening, everybody. This is the Community Consolidated School District 46 Board of Education meeting. The first meeting tonight is the Truth and Taxation hearing. Today is Wednesday, November 16th, 2022, and we're here at Frederick School. I need a call to order and a roll call, please.
Weedman.
Here.
Mack. Absent. Braden. Here. Albert.
Here.
LaCroix.
Here.
Miller.
Here.
And Nash.
Here.
Okay, that gives us a quorum. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So moved.
Second.
Miller.
Aye.
Albert.
Aye.
Weedman.
Aye.
Braden.
Aye.
LaCroix.
Aye.
And Nash.
Aye.
Okay, and we are now up to the 2022 tax levy presentation.
Clicker doesn't work, so I'm going to be saying next slide again. Okay. All right. Okay, this is the public hearing, final 2022 property tax levy presentation of Community Consolidated School District 46. Next slide, please. The district's mission: empowering learners, creating equity, cultivating community. Next slide, please. Here's our finance goal from our strategic plan. And this evening we'll be clarifying financial practices with transparency and our old favorite, the BOD policy 4:20, which determines BOD fund balance of 25 to 30%. Next slide, please. Have to go through the timetable. Here's the timetable of the tax levy process that was presented to you on September 21st. This evening there are two important steps in the process. You get to hear me talk about it, and you get to vote and approve it. The final step is the filing in the last Tuesday of the fiscal year, of the calendar year, which is December 27th. And that has to be filed with Lake County and the Regional Office of Education. Next slide, please. So there's no change been made since October. I like this slide. Since the October tentative presentation, so there's no change at all. I just want to be very clear on that. Next slide, please. Here are all our revenues taken from our recently approved budget. I went through this at the tentative. Again, 60% of our revenue comes from property taxes. Next slide, please. Here are our expenditures. Again, primarily people-related services, and these for our people who teach our students. They clean our buildings and they care for us. For the nurses, it's everybody, which is a very large amount, which is 75%, including purchase services and outsourced, not including our own employees. Next slide, please. Key terms, I won't read them all. I'm just going to go through them. The tax levy, we have the property tax extension limitation law. We have the extension, that's what we're actually voting on, which is the total amount of taxes billed and includes the growth in the levy. CPI, which is a very important component. And then we have the EAV, which is the equalized assessed valuation of all property within the district boundaries. Next slide, please. We have the levy process itself. We have the 5% rule this year because we do have CPI over 5%, so we are tax capped. That's the actual PTEL. The limiting rate is different from the property tax rate, which is the levy divided by the equalized assessed valuation. That's what you actually pay on an individual levy, on your individual basis. And then we have the final extension, which is determined by the county after applying PTEL limitations, which is the tax cap. Next slide, please. The calculation itself, the equalized assessed valuation, we have an estimate which is given to us by the county. We know our prior extension and we know CPI. all these put together, and we have an estimate of new property. Did not change the estimate of new property. Next slide, please. CPI history, as you can see again, I showed this at the tentative. We're dealing with historic levels of heightened inflation. The CPI for October was 7.7, which is clearly above 5 again, as we creep closer to that December value. So again, I just talked at the last Finance Committee about having a CPI in my projections. It's likely going to be over 5 for the following tax year. Next slide, please. New property over the last 5 years, 1.6 million is below our 5-year average of 2.4. As we know, we live in a pretty residential, highly built-up area already. And so, as you can see, we had the 2018-2019 pretty large values, but we're kind of creeping up, and our estimate is 1.6 million this year. Next slide, please. The great disclosure I have to do of our cash balance. This is Public Act 102-0895. We have $43 million of outstanding debt. I have to state that. And this is our audited fund balance, which was just presented this evening at the Finance Committee. Next slide, please. So again, why do we levy to PTEL? Because we're a Tier 1 district, 65% adequacy. We need those dollars. ESSA funding is pretty much spent. We've spent the majority of it, and it's non-recurring. We don't have any other local funding sources. Our interest income is a small percentage of our budget. And we levy to account for any unforeseen increases in new property just above it to make sure that we capture the full amount. And again, we do have significant capital needs beyond our operating levy. Next slide, please. So in summary, we're asking for 40 million. We think we'll receive 39.8. Thank you. I'd like to invite questions from the board.
Anyone have any questions? No? Okay.
Thanks, Jim.
That's it? Yep. Excuse me. Next is public comments or questions. Anybody in the audience have any questions, public comments? No? Okay. Then I need a motion to adjourn the Truth and Taxation hearing.
So moved. I'll second.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Here.
Okay, that gives us a quorum. I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
I'll second.
Miller,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
and Nash.
Aye.
Is there anybody signed up for public comments? Okay. I assume nobody in the audience wants to comment again? Okay. Next is a presentation for the standardized test scores.
And we're switching out our clicker, so give us a moment. We're trying to get it fixed. It's okay.
I don't know. Usually works across the room, but it's okay. I'll just tell you when to click. I'll just say next. It's good. Thank you for allowing me to share this tonight. We have a lot of information. We're going to talk about our standardized assessment overview today, and we're going to talk about both IAR and NWA. So we're going to dig into that a little bit. So next slide. So all of this goes along with our mission, vision, or with our mission. When we're talking about empowering learners, we're talking about where do how are our students improving? How are we empowering our learners? And how are we empowering ourselves as learners? And using this data in order to drive our instruction. And you'll hear me talk a little bit about equity related to this data. And so we want to create equity for all of our learners and cultivate our community as we're learning about how are we proceeding with our progress and our proficiency. Next slide. So this message was in a state report that came out this year from our state superintendent, and I felt like it was really, it matched what we're talking about today. And as we're looking at this, just like the report cards that'll be going home on Friday for our students, the Illinois report card, which became live on October 27th, is just a snapshot of our data. And so as we look at that data, it is meant to both honor the achievement and inspire improvement. And so we'll talk about some celebrations that there are within our data, but also a way for us to look at how are we going to continue our work. Next slide. So we have a lot of outcomes today, so I appreciate you sticking with me through this. First, we are going to look at our Illinois Assessment of Readiness data by school and really by grade level, not by school, so apologize. We're also gonna look at our IAR data by demographic groups. And then we're gonna switch and we're gonna look at our NWA data. So that has a different purpose, but it is also very clearly aligned to IAR. So we're gonna talk about that. We will look at that data by school, and then we'll talk about next steps based on the data. Next slide. So I wanna talk about the two different types of assessment that we're gonna talk about today. And the first is IAR. IAR is an annual state level assessment. So it is focusing on our Illinois standards. It is looking at mastery of those standards. And it is measuring both our ELA and math, and that is for grades 3 through 8. When we're looking at NWA or MAP, that is more of a benchmark assessment, and it is given 3 times a year. So we give it to our students in fall, in winter, and in spring. We as a district do not give that in kindergarten in the fall because we want our students to get used to being in school. And we currently do not give that also to our 8th graders in the spring. There's a lot happening for our 8th graders in spring, and so we are not assessing them in spring. But for the majority of our students, it's 3 times a year. It also very directly aligns to our Illinois grade level standards and is also for ELA and math. And so you'll see how those two correlate a little bit later on. Next slide. So we have school designations, and these school designations started in 2019. And so we received a school designation in 2019, and then they stopped because of everything that was going on with COVID. This was the first year since 2019 that we have received school designations again. And you'll see these are the 4 different designations that we can receive. How they were determined is a little bit different in 2022 than in 2019, and so that's important. One of the things they shared with us is not to compare the two because they really are measuring some different. While the indicators are the same, the measurements to be able to get there are slightly different. And I will say, as we go to the next slide, and you see our, next slide, Brandon, please. So when you look at that, you will notice that we have received the same summative designations that we received in the past, and that is in 2019, and that is a celebration. There are many school districts around the area that did not receive the same designations and that they moved down a level. And so absolutely a celebration for us that we maintained our designations. Next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about IAR. There are different types of assessment. You may remember this slide. It was a while ago. It was 3 years ago, but Paul Lewis did share this with you as well. And so what this is it just talks a little bit about the parts of the assessment. So the standards that are measured are aligned to Illinois for ELA and math. And the questions are covering all of those things. So it's looking at things like critical thinking, reasoning, research, communication, problem-solving skills. And when we switched, and I'll talk a little bit about the timeline of assessment in a minute, but when we switched to IAR, Illinois Assessment of Readiness, we reduced the testing time to 1/3 or to less than 6 hours. And so prior to that, testing time was more. And so they wanted to really ensure that we were they were looking at the right things and truly aligning to what we were looking for as far as proficiency. And then the reporting and the scoring all is moving to an electronic format. In fact, we just received a recent email that there's a portal that students are going to have, but also that parents are going to be able to access. Next slide. So what are the objectives? As we're looking at IAR, we're looking at test items that were developed by educators, which is very important because then it's aligning to instruction. We are also looking at a common scale across assessments. And so we'll talk about the proficiency scale for both ELA and math is 750. So that scale stays the same, and looking at that so that we can dig in and have some deeper conversations about where students are performing. And then it's moving to that full online assessment, as I shared. Next slide. So there are, and you may remember from receiving your reports for your own students, but there are 5 different performance levels. When the state is looking at proficiency, they are looking for students that are falling at either a level 4 or a level 5. Anyone that is below a level 4 is not considered proficient as far as meeting state standards, Illinois state standards. So that's what when we're looking at the percentages of students, that's what we're looking at as students who fall within that 4 and that 5 range. Next slide. So I want to give you a little bit of a timeline here, and you may remember some of these acronyms and some of these things. So in 2015, the state moved to the PERC assessment. So we had that assessment from 2015 to 2018. That assessment was given across several states. But in 2019, Illinois moved to the Illinois Assessment of Readiness. So we moved to IAR. Still, both were measuring standards, but like I shared, the assessment itself changed slightly. In 2020, there was no testing at all because of COVID. In 2021, the testing was optional. As a district, we had approximately 30% participation rate. So when we look at those scores, we need to keep that in mind because it's not measuring our full district. And then in 2022, we had full participation. So that's where we are, and that's some of the data we're going to look at. Next slide, please. So I want to talk, before I actually start showing some of the data, I want to talk a little bit about the national results. So as we look at NAEP, which is the National Assessment of Educational Progress, they measure students in grades 4th grade and 8th grade nationally. And it's kind of a measure that is used as far as where students are benchmarked. What they found in 2022 is that we have had the largest pool of struggling readers. So since 2003 in 4th grade and since 1994 in 8th grade. So in reading, the scores dropped pretty significantly. Next slide. And you will notice that in math, the same thing. They had historic declines in math. So that's important to keep in mind as we're looking at data, in that all of this is happening nationally right now. Next slide. So we're going to look at our grade level data. Head into the first one. So I know you had a chance to look at these slides ahead of time, so I'm not going to go through every single data point on here, but there are a few things that I want to point out to you. So I know that you wanted to see some trend information related to our assessment data. And so again, just as a reminder, 2015 to 2018 was PARC. And then as we head into 2019, we're starting to get into IAR. And that 2021 data is where we had not full participation. So you'll notice here, this is 3rd grade, and this is for ELA and math. And we have the blue is our district data, and the red is the state. So you can see our trends here related to ELA and math for 3rd grade. Next slide, please. So we'll look at 4th grade as well. And then next slide. So this is our 5th grade. So as we start to look at 5th grade, we can recognize that there are some areas that we notice, especially so if you look in that math, we notice that the state is slightly above the district. So this is data that we are looking into further, and we want to determine why that is occurring. And then we want to directly respond to that. And we already have started to dig into that, and I'll talk about in a little bit about some things that we're already doing as we're noticing this data. So we're also looking, as we look at this data, at other data points, because this is just one of our data points, to see are our patterns the same across multiple data points. Next slide. So you'll notice here, this is 6th grade. And then next slide, 7th grade. And 8th grade. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So we also have our demographic breakdown, and this is demographics as a district as a whole. And as we're going to look at this, I'll have you go to the first demographic slide. One of the things, I just took IAR for this data so that we were looking at the same test as we're digging into this. This is just our overall ELA. We notice, again, that there are some differences between some of our student groups, and that again is data that we are looking into, and we are trying to find out why is that happening, and we've already started to have some conversations about some things that we are going to start doing differently. You can look at math. Next slide. So we're going to switch gears, and we're going to move out of our state assessment, and we are going to talk a little bit about NWA MAP growth. And the MAP growth is the name of the NWA assessment. They have multiple assessments. This is the assessment that we're using. So you can go to the next slide. So I want to talk a little bit about what this assessment is before I start to show you some data. So NWA MAP growth is a computer adaptive test, and what that means is that as students start answering questions, it either gets harder or easier in order to find where their RIT score will fall or really where they are performing. And so it's able to adapt to the way that students are answering questions. And so what that does is it allows us to really compare students in a way of where are they falling, but then it also gives us some great reports as far as what our students, where are some areas that they need to work on, and where are some other areas that they're doing really well. So thinking about that, the other piece that you'll notice on here is that the scores, RIT scores, have the same meaning. So a specific score at one grade level, when you score a RIT score, it's the same, means the same thing at another grade level. So we'll talk a little bit about that as I get into our next couple slides. So I'm going to have you go to the next slide. So when we talk about RIT, we're talking about that our students can they can receive this score that is going to allow us to pinpoint exactly where they would likely answer the question. So it's the way that the test manipulates the information to be able to come up with a score. And again, it's allowing us to compare one grade level to the next so that we can monitor students' growth. We don't want a student's RIT score to stay the same over time. We want them to show us growth. Maybe you go to the next slide. And this is how it helps us as far as connecting to IAR. So MAP growth, there are MAP growth cut scores related to IAR proficiency. So on IAR, in order to hit a level 4, so remember I told you level 4 or level 5 is that you are falling in that proficiency range, a 750 across grades 3 through 8 is a proficient score. So anything 750 or above, but if you hit that 750, you've hit a proficiency mark. So what MAP has done, or what NWA has done, is they've created these cut scores that, so this is for fall. You can see fall, winter, spring for both ELA and math, and you can look by grade level where a student should be, which RIT score they should be hitting in order for them to be proficient. And so, or for order for us to see proficiency in the spring on the state assessment. So it would mean they're on track. So if we look at second grade there, if a student is falling above a 183 or 183 or above, then we would know that they're on track to be proficient. If a student is falling below that 183, then that's something we want to look at and we want to target in order to make some instructional plans, because that means that that student is not on track to be proficient. Next slide. So this is our actual data from our fall NWA MAP assessment. So this is in math, and there are two different charts or two different graphs and charts on here. So the first is that chart. What that chart is showing us is by grade level, and remember a 4 or 5 correlates to a 4 or 5 on the state assessment. We're looking at proficiency for that, where NWA is that they are projecting our students will be proficient from that fall assessment. So by grade level. We can dig into individual students once we have this information. So if we have students that are falling at a level 1, 2, or 3, we want to look at that to see what do we need to do to get them to grow in order to meet proficiency, because where they're falling in the fall is not where they have to land, right? We can make instructional plans based on that information. And in the same way, we can look at a student that's at a level 4 and see how can I even move them up to a level 5, right? We want to continue to have our students grow. The pie graph on there is not individual grade levels, that's our total district projections. So this one is math, and then I'm going to have you switch to the next slide, which is going to show us reading. All right, next slide. So now what we're going to look at is we are looking at our NWA performance by school. You'll notice that these are broken, and again, this is our fall data. There's no kindergarten again because we don't have kindergarten take NWA in the fall. You will notice that we have this is by school, by grade level, and so you can notice that our students are taking either math, everyone's taking math, and our students are either taking reading in English or Spanish, depending on which classroom they're in. I'll go to the next slide. So that first one was Avon. This one's Meadowview. When you look at this, you will notice that there's only grades 1 and 2 for Spanish, and that correlates with the classrooms that we have at that school. Okay, next slide. So again, as we're looking at this, we can look by grade level for the school for math, reading in English, and reading in Spanish. And the next slide. And again, there's no Spanish here because it correlates with the classrooms. We'll go to the next slide. This is Frederick. And our next one. And the next slide. So here we have Park. I had to split them, so this is just reading because it's grades 1-8, and then the next slide will be math. Or sorry, other way around, it was math and then reading. Okay, next slide. So what does all this mean? We have a lot of data, and we always want to use our data to help us to become better. We never want to have so much data that it's just sitting there and we're not doing anything with it. So we've started to have some conversations, and some of these things that are written up here for next steps are things that we've already started, and others are things that we really were digging into this data and into the Illinois report card that we want to dig into and start working on. So as we look at that first one on there, focus on instruction and planning through an equity lens. So we're already doing some of that work. Some of that work is coming out of the equity audit and is coming through the work of the EAP, and really starting to have some conversation about the demographic slides that we showed you and how do we ensure that all of our students are receiving instruction that is going to help them to make the progress that we need and want them to make. When we look at that second bullet about working in content teams, this is work that we're continuing to do. Many years ago, when Paul started having content-alike groups work on a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And what that means is that no matter which school, if you are in the same grade level, you are receiving the same standards and you are getting the same instruction. So the way that a teacher goes about getting to that place of of mastery is going to depend upon the students within the classroom and the art of teaching, but the instructional practices and the assessment and the standards that we are working on are all going to be guaranteed and viable. So if I move from if I move from one of our schools in first grade to another school in first grade, we're receiving the same standards and we're working on the same curricular materials. And so that's something that we're continuing to work on, and it's an ongoing process. We have both teams meet in grade level teams, they meet in content teams. A lot of our work during late starts is focused on this, where we're really focused on how do we improve our instructional practices and how do we ensure our assessments are measuring what we need them to give us further data on a daily basis to make decisions. Which leads into the next one, which is results orientation. And when you're talking about results orientation, so both guaranteed and viable curriculum and results orientation are part of professional learning communities. And they are, there are 3 tenets or 3 big ideas that make up a professional learning community. So that first is really looking at focus on learning, which is looking at that guaranteed and viable curriculum. And the second is this results orientation. So how are we using data? And then we're not just talking these big assessments that are given once a year or 3 times a year. We're talking daily formative assessment, right? So if I'm working with a student in the classroom and I'm watching what they're doing, that's formative data. I'm having a conversation with a student in a small group. That's data that I can use to help to drive my instruction. And so as we're having those conversations at the building level, we're having team conversations about what's working, what's not. Same thing at the district level. And so learning from each other. My data might look different from my colleagues' data, and we're gonna have open, honest conversations about what worked for you, what worked for those students, and how can I maybe utilize some of those things. And so that's really an important part about ensuring that we are providing students what they need. Next slide. So, and some other things, and these are pieces that are already in place that we've already started this school year, started a little bit early on, but as we started to look, as soon as we had our map data, so map, as soon as that map window closes, we can pull these reports and we can start working on these, looking at that data to help us to know more about our students in our schools and our classrooms. And so we've created some district and school level goals that are really they're focused on continuous improvement. So these are just some examples of things that are happening right now. There's, we're looking specifically at that 26th to 60th percentile. So that's really those kids that are falling below that level 4, right? And how are we moving them up at least one performance measure and performance range? And part of why we started at 26th percentiles because we already had tier 3 plans in place for kids that are below the 25th. But it's that middle group that we really wanted to target as well to say, what else are we doing and how are we supporting? Another example is there's intervention time at all of our buildings that was added in last school year, 30 minutes of intervention. And GMS has created a clear intentional focus on math this year for all students, and really looking at how are we increasing student understanding. So even if they were already at that proficiency mark, how are we getting them to extend even further? And that's not to say they're not focused on reading, because they are working on reading as well, but they have a plan that is very clear related specifically to math as well, and all students are receiving that. And then this last bullet on here is we have to think about more than just academics, right? And we know that everything over the last 3 years with the pandemic has impacted both adults and students. And so we have a focus on trauma-informed practices to support students and staff. And we've had Dr. Doug Bolton, as you've heard about, come in to work with us. And he's focusing on how do we make connections with our students? How do we build relationships with our students? And there's research around if students feel safe and connected within their classrooms and within their school environment, they are going to show larger achievement. And so how are we supporting that? And how are we supporting our teachers to know strategies and things that they can use within their classroom, as well as how are we working with our students for them to be able to see some of these things and to know that other side of learning. So that's really important. Next slide. So we talked about all those things. I told you it was a lot, but we did talk about all those things. And so, next slide, I am going to open it up for questions.
I actually got a question. Maybe it's a little bit more of a statement. So looking at the first set of graphs that you put out there, you saw very little drop in the third graders, right? From 19 down to 21, 22, very little drop, right? So But once you got into the larger, older grades, it started to drop even faster. It started to drop faster and larger. To me, as an outside person in education, that leads me to believe that somewhere between fourth, fifth, and sixth is probably where the most strenuous learning takes place to keep those grades up. Whereas kindergarten through third was able to maintain by whatever they were doing, right? So is it, and I'm just asking theoretically off the top of my head, is it possible to look into the curriculum we have in those grades and see if there's something that needs to be tweaked to make it so that growth becomes greater in the subsequent years? Does that make sense?
We have.
And we have.
And we have.
And we have. I can answer that. So, and a lot of this work
Not a
was,
canned question, by the way.
yeah. And a lot of this work, was done as I was making this transition into this role, right? So I can't take a lot of credit for these things. I'm going to, Paul Lewis and Amanda did a lot of work in order to make some of these things happen. But our new literacy resource that you adopted last spring is really looking at both of them. So both our Scholastic at K-5 and our My Perspectives at 6-8. It does a really good job of, one, meeting the standards, but two, is very rigorous. And when I say rigorous, it's truly getting to what are the skills and strategies that students need to learn. It's also looking at how are we providing instruction in the classroom. So with our K-5, we're looking at setting up the classroom differently and really spending the majority of our time working in small groups so that we can identify and work with students specifically on their needs, and while getting them to those grade level mastery standards. And then as we get in, and that's all the way up to 5th grade, right? So as we're looking at that piece, how are we truly meeting our students' needs and identifying that? There's a lot of daily assessment that's happening, and it's not, when I say assessment like that, that's not paper and pencil, sit down and take a test. It's activities that are happening in the classroom and utilizing those pieces to then make instructional decisions. And then same for 6-8, we are really, we heard at the beginning, and I will say we've done a lot of work with our 6-8 teachers over the last couple of weeks. And one of the things I've heard from our teachers is we're already seeing more growth in our students right now than we've seen in a long time. So I think that's super exciting.
I just wanted to jump in regarding reading or ELA. We also have a new set of materials at 6-8 that Amy was talking about, and it's really very different from what we had prior in 6-8. In the past, just like might have occurred when you were all in school, a lot of the literacy instruction in 6th through 8th grade was done through the reading of novels, which is really fun and engaging for kids, but is sometimes a little bit less skill focused. And the Savas My Perspectives reading series truly hones in on skills. And so instead of perhaps reading an entire novel, they might just read a chapter and hopefully get excited about that novel and want to read it. But it's very focused on very specific skills in English language arts. So we're excited about that. We're seeing some very nice growth already.
Yeah, and I would say as far as math, we're looking at what we're using, and we actually are we're starting a pilot for grades 5-8 using another resource called Dreambox that is allowing it will help to meet students where they're at, and will provide students another opportunity in addition to our Carnegie and Mathia to be able to help students to meet those standards.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. So thanks so much for the presentation. It was really comprehensive and well done. Similar to Mr. Wheatman's question with just a little bit of a different lens. Also with the data, it looks like 5th and 7th grade tends to kind of take the lowest dip, and we know that those are transition years, like with our schools being split up, right, 2 years and 2 years. So I was curious as to what are some things too that we can do from a readiness perspective to hand the kids off to the to the next school. I know our teachers do a lot of like talking when it's time for classroom planning, but even in terms of just that educational kind of bridge, recognizing that it seems like it's something with the 5th and 7th grade.
And we've actually started to have some of those conversations. So, I think we can have some intentional planning, and we are having conversation right now with our leadership team around how can we look at this to help us to move forward. Those content meetings that I was talking about that we have really doing late starts, those are job alikes. We have grades 5-8 together. And so that gives us an opportunity to have some of those conversations there, where we are looking at instruction and having conversations about standards and having conversations about assessment. And so we've started to have more what I'm calling vertical articulation around what's happening from grade to grade. And so those are really intentional conversations to do exactly what you're talking about. You're welcome.
It's on that same topic, so I just wanted to, it was really interesting that you got that out of the data, Tamika, because I was going to ask a similar question and hadn't noticed the pattern of the only two places where pre and post pandemic we went from being above state average to being below in 2022 were grades 5 and 7. And to your point about trauma-informed practices, right? Moving to a new school is pretty traumatic in and of itself. So that's a very interesting insight, and I hope something that you can use.
Yeah, I think it is, and we do talk about that, right? So absolutely, it's when you're moving from one school to another, you have to learn the new routines and learn, right? It is something that we are having conversations about. How do we help to support students as they're making those transitions? And making those transitions during the pandemic, there were students, we've had conversation that there were students that started Frederick in 5th grade and now are in 8th grade and really didn't, so that, they didn't really have that time to connect. So it goes back to those connections.
I have 5 questions.
All right.
So I whittled it down just so everyone knows. So the first one, just thinking about the role of the school board. What's your understanding of the school board's expectations, meaning the needs and wants of the district for standardized test scores?
Yeah, so we are required, right, to participate in these assessments. They are state mandated, and they're as an accountability measure. So I know that you were interested in this presentation because you had asked for it as a board, and so wanted to know what was happening and what is our data and what does it all mean? And so I think one thing to keep in mind is that this is one data point. It's one moment in time, right? And so I think as we think about this, how we use this data then to help us to make decisions, to think about what's coming in the future, and to continually keep all of this. You're asking great questions right now, and I think all of this pieced together is part of a puzzle for you, as the board to be thinking about how do we help to manage what's coming forward, and how do we help to maintain, student achievement at high levels for all of our students.
Great. Okay, thank you. So adhering to state, federal regulations, and then also just that we're tracking it and watching it. Those are the expectations you're hearing from us.
Yeah.
Okay, great, thanks. Okay, number 2, in what ways and this is an environmental bent, so I'm going to take us away from student achievement into how are we impacting the planet. So in what ways, and I honestly don't know, so I'm not leading anywhere on this, but how does this contribute to the waste stream of our school in terms of anything, paper, anything, whatever it is?
Great question. So
in the district office too, not just in the classroom.
Yeah, so great question. So all of these assessments are digital, so there is no paper. Which is great. There used to be. I would have in my office boxes and boxes and boxes, right? By grade level, there'd be an ELA one, there'd be a math one. So there is no paper anymore. The state has moved completely to digital. NWA is also digital. And that is why we've moved to, sending home, everything we can digitally as well. The IAR is going to be having a parent portal that'll be digital too, so there won't be even that paper moving forward. And we can start sending home NWA results digitally as well. So right now we have NWA paper that we print and send home, but Other than that, it's all digital.
Okay. Number 3. So in terms of instructional time and money, how does our district's investment exceed or meet federal and state requirements?
Yeah.
Or I'm assuming it doesn't fall below those, so.
Doesn't fall below
No.
those, right? Exactly. So, I think Mr. Wildman has spoken to our finances a lot tonight too. That we are meeting, I would say, but there really isn't a lot of correlation between funding we receive and the assessments themselves. So we don't receive more or less money based on that. If we don't participate, we would not receive our funding.
And I am not
Yeah.
suggesting we
No,
don't
I know that.
participate.
I know
Just-
you're
just so
not, but
everyone
I
knows.
feel like, right?
I'm actually looking for very simple answers, like how much instructional time do kids spend
Yeah,
on testing? And how much money do we spend
got it.
buying the tests? I don't know how to,
Yeah,
there's
so the
probably better language
tests,
for that, but.
there's a cost to map, correct. But as far as time, because they made it so much shorter than it used to be.
Yeah.
It's maximum 6 hours for that total.
Time frame in a day
yeah.
or in, I'm sorry,
It's total. So including ELA and
per test.
yeah, and math. So combined, 6 hours total per school year for IAR.
Oh, okay.
That's it. MAP is more. So MAP takes our kids most kids finish between 45 and 60 minutes. We give a longer time frame than that if they need it. Great thing about MAP is you can start and stop the test too if kids need to. But we do, and that is, we do that, so there's 2 tests 3 times a year.
I want to add something into
Yeah.
that. As I mentioned earlier, there is a cost to MAP. I don't have that number at the top of my head. So we don't pay for the state tests. They're required. If we as a school system selected not to purchase MAP or any other assessment to run alongside IAR, what we would be doing is knowing that, okay, we're just going to hope for the best every year on IAR because we would have nothing to gauge our students' learning against throughout the year. So that's the thing that we pay for, that thing that allows us to say, okay, this one's on track, this one needs more, this one needs these skills, and that's what we're paying for when we buy NWEA.
And most districts in Lake County use it. It's nationally normed, it's nationally used. When you talk to most school districts, NWEA is the most frequently used assessment for that purpose.
So I'm going to piggyback on your question about
Yeah,
two
go.
tests or what you just said.
I've got
about two
lots.
tests, is the IRI, the one that comes from the state has changed so many times, right?
Yes.
Park.
IAR or whatever it was before Park, right?
Yeah.
But-
ISAT,
Right,
IGAP.
So they change that every couple of years depending on who the administration is and who's in charge,
Yeah.
right? MAP is more consistent across the board.
Correct.
Gives us a more pattern data set. So there's an advantage to staying with the MAP and PAIN.
Yes, and it also allows us to measure growth. So one of the things that MAP gives us is it gives us in the report, so the report even that you get home as parents, it has a projected growth. So even in your fall score, you'll see where they're projected to fall in the spring so that you can also monitor that. And so it gives us that opportunity to see, are students growing and are they making the amount of progress that they should be making between fall and winter and then between winter and spring. So yeah.
Okay, almost done. These are probably easier for you, but where do you notice positive deviance among the schools, among demographic groups? And for anyone who's maybe listening and not familiar with what I'm talking about with positive deviance, I mean, if we have a situation that we're concerned about, it seems like it would be valuable to say, okay, who are the kids that are doing well in this group, even though the rest of the group is not doing well? And what are those conditions and how do we build those?
Mm-hmm. So I'm going to go back to those 3 big ideas I was talking about, right? So I was talking about that focus on learning, that results orientation, and then the third one I don't think I actually mentioned is collaborative culture. And so as we're working through those three big ideas of a professional learning community, that's where we're engaging in those conversations. So our teachers are identifying and having conversations about assessment, right? They are looking at, especially as we're digging into this map and our map data. I actually gave our principals to use with their teachers at their buildings a protocol to do almost exactly what you're describing. So make a list of students who maybe are falling within certain ranges or aren't showing the progress that we think they should be making. And let's talk about instructional practices. Let's talk about what is it that our students are doing, or what are you doing with our students? Because it's both pieces, right?
Sure.
It's what our teachers doing with our students, but then how are our students performing based on that? And what's working? And then how are we making decisions? And let's use some of what's working to help other students. And if I'm having an open, vulnerable conversation about that as a teacher, I'm going to be able to learn from others, but I'm also going to be able to help others learn. And so it's that collaborative culture that we have created. So teachers are meeting on a weekly basis together as grade levels or as contents. And then in addition to that, some of our late start conversations. So really digging into what does all this mean, and having the open conversations, because that's how you're going to learn and help support students.
Great.
There's
Thank
a lot
you.
of research behind that working too.
Yeah. Last one. So if anyone, any teacher, any parent, any administrator, anyone who's listening, any school board member who might feel a little demoralized by some of the challenges ahead, what would you say to encourage them, specifically to parents who are listening?
Yeah. So I think there are a couple different things. One is that piece of we really are looking at rigor of instruction and the instructional materials and resources that we're using. So, I think our new literacy resources are absolutely going to be geared towards, and they are, we've already seen it in the last few months. They're geared towards helping our students to be able to close some of those gaps. I think the fact that we're having these conversations and we are truly opening up the dialogue and looking at what can we do better and different in order to support our students. And what our buildings have done this year is each building has looked at their data individually and created goals of how they are going to help to support students. And teachers are part of that, and teachers have been part of those conversations. And so there is a lot of work that's being done that is, I like the word intentional. It's all intentionality. We are looking at the data and using the data to help us to move forward and to guide our instruction.
Great. That's it. Thank you.
All right, thanks.
Christy Britton?
This is the classic, not so much a question as a comment. But it just struck me as you were answering Christy Miller's questions, which were great questions, and a lot of which I had, so they were answered. It just struck me that you're really bringing the science. There is an art to teaching, like you said, but there is a science to teaching and to education as well. And I think I so appreciate this presentation that kind of like opens that door to help us understand, our community understand, that this is a group of professionals who spend their entire, multiple hours a week, not just going to the book room and looking around and seeing what I want to do next, which was what I got to do in the early 90s. Which novel do I want to read?
Right?
And this is truly rigorous and intentional. And I really want to hit that point that that I want to acknowledge our educators for knowing what they're doing and for doing it. And this is like any other profession. It takes a lot of expertise, and I think we heard a lot of that tonight. So thank you for that.
Jason? Jessica?
A lot of my questions have already been answered, but I just want to say thank you, because this really helped me understand why do we have the kids do IAR and MAP and all these tests. But now it makes sense to me. It makes a lot more sense, and it does seem like valuable data that it gives you, so, and all the teachers.
Thanks.
Okay.
Can I make one more comment too?
Sure.
Just a thank you. Having been on the other side of conversation about a student who shall remain nameless, it was really helpful as a parent on the other side of that to see the test scores and to understand what they meant and how to apply them. So thank you for making this clearer to all of
Welcome.
us.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, thanks.
Next, we are up to board reports. Does anybody have anything to report out? Jessica, go ahead.
I have a few thank yous to give. I want to thank the schools for the variety of activities and opportunities to honor veterans. Own personal story, I was able to have my son interview a couple neighbors. And had the school not suggested that, we wouldn't have had this engaging opportunity with some neighbors and learn more about them. And I just think it made them feel special, and they knew that schools beyond what their children are attending just down the street, the other schools care too. The Frederick Friday Night Out Rec Night, I'm not exactly sure what it's called. I just want to thank the staff. There were some staff members there, I think. I wasn't there, my son was. It's no adults allowed, or no parents allowed, but I think there were some parent volunteers and probably some staff who deserve big thanks for that, for a bunch of fifth graders running around. Want to thank the Community Engagement Committee for organizing the Fall Food Drive. That was another opportunity to engage with conversation and empathy building with my son, and I know I'm not the only one, so enjoyed that. Wanted to add that I attended the Grays Lake Chamber of Commerce Lunch and Learn today about first responders, and that was really informative. And I encourage community members to go and just learn about any of these topics. And it was great to learn about partnerships that I was unaware of. So, and I was, there are a couple other things that, like the Way Out programming about substance use, just things that I was unaware of and want to make sure that our community members know that they can learn about those.
Jason? Christy? Christy?
A couple. Just wanted to thank Katie O'Brien and Dr. Gluck for the podcast. It was very fun to listen to that, and so I will join Dr. Gluck in thanking, is it Jeannie Spilling who inspired you? Yeah, Spiller. So thank you to her for inspiring you, especially after such a wonderful presentation. Also wanted to congratulate our own Chris Wildman for the, let me see if I get the Meritorious Budget Award for Excellence in the preparation and issuance of our budget, and also the completion of the budget book. So thank you for all that work. I know it was a ton. And then I listened to a webinar from the Illinois Municipal League, which I thought was interesting. And there were two that I was tempted to listen to. One of them actually I thought might be helpful for the task force because it's on economic development. And they're free. They're about right around an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. So again, it's the Illinois Municipal League. And the one I did listen to, because I'm specifically looking for how to measure equity in the CEC and the work that we're doing. And it was, I thought, valuable, might be valuable for all of us. The name of it is Making Equity Stick Measures for Cities to Institutionalize Social Equity. And they identified 3 areas where we can make sure that we're infusing equity systemically in our, for them it was in municipal areas, but I think we could transfer a lot of it in a school setting or a district setting. So I'll just tell you quickly, there were 3 ways to do that. One we're already doing. So it says make sure equity is explicitly mentioned in our mission and vision, and any value statements, which we already do. The second was institutional. They recommend hiring a staff person who's dedicated to, and I thought this was very sweet. So a sweet spot. A staff position is responsible for equitable inclusive civic engagement. So it would actually be a staff person that would be responsible for the district's equity and community engagement practices. So just thought that was interesting. And then representation, which I believe is important to the equity committee already, but that they have a system where their board or officers are elected or represent districts, or in our case, neighborhoods, and it's reflected in the financial process and in the salaries. I am not suggesting that school board members be paid, but if in reaching out or having representation, there's a stipend for that, and I've heard that in other places in asset-based community development as well, because the amount of time that people volunteer is often prohibitive and keeps us from having representation across all demographics. So I thought I would throw those out. But if I want to say there is an email that's scheduled to come out to you tomorrow, and I'm realizing I didn't finish it, but there will be an email in your box at some point at the end of the week with a link to that presentation. And again, there's other presentations that might be helpful for the task force as you engage in that. And that's my board report.
All right. Ms. Nash?
Thank you, Mr. Wheatman. I think as part of the 2021 Delegate Assembly, that was one of the resolutions that had been proposed and voted down with regards to, increasing equity amongst those, wanting to serve but potentially cost prohibitive. So good insight, and I know that's come up. So perhaps if there's a strong enough passion behind it, maybe this board considers something for 2023. That said, so after a what feels like, I don't know, already Friday, like 3 times over, it was really nice to come in to see recognition from our superintendent for School Board Members Day. So I just thought that was really awesome, and just wanted to say thank you. Because I know sometimes, over the last few years, many of us kind of get in the trout, and sometimes it feels a little thankless. So this was nice recognition, so thank you.
Okay. The only thing I had is just to let the public know that last week on Wednesday, this board participated in a special board meeting workshop with the Illinois Associations of School Board. We had a proctor come in and go over reflect, respond, and recover. It was a workshop about dealing with crisis in the school district and how we operated and what we could do better and what we can make changes going on in the future. So we spent about 3 hours going through that workshop with the IASB. We do these workshops periodically. It helps with training hours, but it also helps with learning to work together as a board. So I just wanted to put that out there that we did that last week. And that's all we have. So now we're up to the superintendent.
All righty. Well, first of all, I want to welcome some high school students that we have with us today. I'm assuming you're here for class, not just because you wanted to come. Yeah, and I think I may have met your teacher last week. Do you all have the same teacher? No? Oh, well, I met one of the teachers who was sending students to us for board meetings, and I let him know that down the line, all the students who have come to observe meetings have been extremely respectful, professional, and we are glad that you're here. Absolutely. I too wanted to comment on the Veterans Day program, so thank you for doing that, Jessica. Specifically, I was able, because I can only get to one, I was at Park this year, and my goodness, the amount of honor and celebration, I guess I'll put it, to our veterans was just enormous. That day started at that school with a special breakfast for the veterans and their families. It was put on by the Park PTO, and they did a great job of being able to gather funding and resources from the community for that breakfast. And then that moved into a wonderful parade, and then this unbelievable ceremony, an assembly that included multiple musical performances, and all of the veterans that were there being able to have a chance to speak to the students and to be honored. It was really quite a thing. And I want to give a special recognition to one of the teachers over at Park, Meredith Kurzweil, who really did the lion's share of organizing. So it was really very special. And I wanted to comment that I have worked in quite a few school districts that have school on Veterans Day and then forget all about Veterans Day. I've seen that happen places, and it does not happen here, and I think that's something we should be proud of. And I'm going to hand it over to Amy, because she can't be tired of talking yet, who's going to talk about some training and report cards and conferences and an after-school pilot that we're getting started.
Yeah, thanks. So the first is I want to talk a little, we've been talking a little bit about my perspectives tonight. And we had on both November 3rd and November 9th, we had half-day trainings for all of our 6th through 8th grade teachers that are using my perspectives. And I will tell you, we heard from principals when they got back to their schools. We heard from teachers when they were leaving that they were so excited about what they had learned from our really dynamic presenter, and that they just couldn't wait to go try what they had learned in those sessions. And the people who were there on November 3rd, even just in the morning group, by the time the afternoon group were already coming saying, we heard how much we're going to learn here and we're so excited about it. So I think we are off to a great start with my perspectives. I also wanted to share, as I already did through my earlier presentation, but report cards will be out on Friday. They will be live. They're digital, so they'll be live at 3 o'clock through Infinite Campus. If instructions will be coming out from building principals about how to access them if people do not remember how. And so we'll be able to have those soon. And then with that, then conferences are next week on Monday and Tuesday. I know that our teachers are excited to be meeting with families, and those will be held both virtually and in person. So we're giving the option for both this year. And on Monday, they are from 3:30 to 6, and on Tuesday, they are from 1 to 8. So our teachers will be engaging in that communication with their families. And then the last thing I'm really excited to talk about is we have some of our ESSER ARP money that was earmarked specifically for after-school programming. And we had gone back and forth about how we could spend some of this, but also how we could target students and support students. And so we were going to pilot because we want to see how it goes and what the student participation rate is. But we have developed a pilot for a virtual drop-in for students in grades 5 through 8. And what that will be is we're going to offer a 4 to 6 o'clock time slot and a 6:30 to 8:30 time slot. And we have some of our teachers who have shared that they're interested in being available for that. And what we'll do is we're going to be sending out a link, so it's going to be that same link, and it's going to be Monday through Thursday to allow opportunity whether students want support with homework or they want support on some concepts they've been working on in class to be able to help to support. So we're really excited and hope that we felt that virtual piece would be equitable for all of our students, given that we couldn't add any additional busing at the end of the day. And so this is an opportunity for all of our students to be able to reach out to teachers.
Thank you. I'm going to hand it over to Mr. Wildman to talk about the award that was mentioned a moment ago.
Thank you, Lynn. Yes, we've won the award for the second year running, which I'm really happy. I've never actually presented to you at the same time as having the award because I submitted it as soon as it was complete, and they evaluated it within 3 weeks, which was amazing because I was one of the first to submit it to ASBO. So really happy that we've now won it for 2 years in a row, and thank you for supporting this. It means a lot to the business office that we are producing a financial report that is worthy of this district and worthy of the community. And a big thanks to Leslie for all your design work, your creativity, and making it look so beautiful. Thank you so much.
And board members, you all have a copy in front of you. And Leslie, is it already linked on our website? All right, so any community member can go in and see this, see our budget. So thank you for that, and congratulations. I will hand it over to Mrs. Lorenzo to talk about a family university that is in the process of being created.
Good evening. I'm excited to share a little sneak peek about our plans this year. As you know, our mental health providers in our school district have historically created a family university or two each year. And we're very excited to bring those back in person this year. And we have secured Dr. Bolton, who has been doing our work with trauma-informed practices with our staff, to come speak to our families about emotional regulation and supporting our students and their children through the lens of emotional regulation and supporting them versus motivation and rewards. So I'm very excited. That date is set for February 2nd, and we're looking at generally the 6 o'clock hour. So we're working on our marketing. We're going to be sending that stuff over to Leslie to make look amazing and get that communication out to our families. So we're excited. Very happy about this.
And then in addition to Dr. Bolton there that night, we have another group that'll be coming and providing
thank you,
materials.
yes.
Yeah.
So I've had a really nice exchange with a representative from the Be Smart firearm organization with the sole purpose of not necessarily getting into conversation about whether or not to own firearms, but to ensure that families have safe practices for those who choose, and have access to safe materials and resources if they need to. So in our conversations, we ultimately decided we're going to push forward a communication from the district this winter, and that will highlight a table that we'll have set up at our family university night with representatives from Be Smart.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I too wanted to highlight the D46 Inspires podcast. So many of us enjoyed listening to it last year as we got a chance to hear how different individuals honor staff members and teachers that meant a lot to them. So Christy, thank you for listening and for commenting on it. It's back this year. Thank you to Katie O'Brien, who has created this podcast, and this most recent episode highlights Mrs. Amy Gluck. So if you want to learn more about Mrs. Gluck and what makes her tick, please do listen to that D46 Inspires podcast. Jim, or actually no, I think it was Tamika mentioned board appreciation. So thank you for mentioning that. Yes, this is Board Appreciation Week, I believe, and month, and I think yesterday was the actual day, but really all year should be Board Appreciation time because you all give such an unbelievable amount of time and heart to this work. And as Christy acknowledged, it's not a paid position at all. This is volunteer work that you do, and we all feel your support on a daily basis. We will be celebrating at the end tonight with cake. So students, if you're able to hang around, there will be cake. And we were excited to celebrate and honor you. So thank you for all that you do. And last but not least, finally, yes, Brandon, I'm ready with my slides, if you would put those up. I wanted to share, you may have noticed that we did a thought exchange recently, and we haven't closed it yet. Oh, I think you're on the last slide, my friend. It's a good slide, but it's the last slide. There we are. All right, thanks. And I'm going to ask you to move them for me. I'm not even going to play with the clicker, and I'm staying right here. So we did a thought exchange for our community and our staff. It's not closed yet, but I did pull the reports today because I thought we'd share some things with you. This is all about cultivating community because the question, slide please, was so much has changed over the past year as we near the season of Thanksgiving. Now is a great time to ask, what are you grateful for now? And so we wanted to share with you some of our top comments, top thoughts. Slide, please. I'm going to go ahead and read these to you. That is not best practice for sharing a presentation, but I think it will work today. So here we go. Here are the top-rated thoughts that came from staff. Staff members who support our students. We have absolutely amazing staff. That's what somebody was grateful for, and it was highly rated by other staff members. The general positive energy that we see at school. I'm grateful for meeting so many wonderful people and having an opportunity to help in kids' lives. It's important to focus on the positive in your life and how you can make others' day just a little better. Working with great people. I am blessed to have amazing family, friends, and colleagues. To have such amazing coworkers who are always supportive and understanding. To work in a setting that is full of positivity and empowerment, which helps make a difference in the children we work with. Slide, please. Seeing family over Thanksgiving, or healthy family or family. I kind of put all those together, people excited about seeing their families. I am grateful for having a more balanced school and home life than before. It is important to me to have that balance so that I can be there for my family mentally and physically when I get home. Our amazing colleagues in leadership, there are no better. Putting the focus back on learning, and I think we've had some great examples of that this evening already. I just feel like even though the work is hard, we are moving in the right direction. Our kids need us so much. Normalcy this school year. Health. I was afraid I would have to retire or quit because I couldn't do the physical aspects of my job. That has changed. I thought that was a really powerful statement that someone made. And moving forward, there are more, but those were some of the top ones. And here are some top-rated thoughts from families. Teachers, I'm thankful for the amazing hard work that teachers do every day. I'm grateful for Woodview's gardens. I loved seeing kids in the neighborhood pick radishes and watermelons, lettuce and snap peas, a beautiful introduction to systems thinking. I'm grateful to sense our students' increased persistence, resilience, and humor despite and perhaps because of the challenges of the pandemic. Our amazing school district community, through it all, everyone is doing an incredible job. I appreciate all of the school and community events. It has helped us feel more connected to Grays Lake. Slide. And the last two that were towards the top that I wanted to highlight. Although the past several years have looked different, one thing that has stayed the same has been the dedication of the D46 teachers. Thank you. It takes true dedication to stick with the job when what you thought you were hired to do changes, and you continue to show up every day smiling. I'm so grateful for the school district members who have worked so hard this year and all past years educating my children. We need a caring, educated, and supportive community, and without our teachers, that would be impossible. Thank you. And I just will close that by sharing that I did share this presentation with our staff late this afternoon. The way that thought exchange was organized, staff could only communicate with other staff members through the thought exchange, and then community members could communicate with community members. I wanted our staff to see what families were saying about them. So with that, that's the end of the superintendent report today. Oh, wait, there's the slide again. Thank you, Brandon. Finally, sorry. And there's the word cloud that came out of all of the comments. And it is still open, I believe, through tomorrow, so people still want to participate, they can. But you can see that people shared a lot of things that they're feeling grateful for. That's the end of the presentation.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you. Next, we need a motion to approve the consent agenda, including the personnel addendum that was sent out earlier today.
So moved.
Second.
Braden,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
and Weedman.
Aye. Next, we're up to action items. So the first action item is I need a motion to approve the 2022 tax levy in the total amount of $40,003,927.77. That includes the certificate of tax levy, the resolution regarding amounts necessary to be levied for the year 2022, the resolution to levy certain special taxes for special education district and IMRF purposes, resolution to levy working tax or cash tax, and the resolution to levy tort tax.
I will make that motion.
I'll second.
Weedman,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Nash,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
LaCroy,
Aye.
and Albert.
Aye.
Okay. Next, we need a motion to approve the 2022 district audit.
So moved.
I'll second.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
and Nash.
Aye.
And final action item, right? Yeah. Is a motion to approve the request to rescind the letter of intent to retire from Colleen Irvin submitted during the 2018-2019 school year in accordance to the collective bargaining agreement.
So moved.
Second.
LaCroy,
Aye.
Braden,
Aye.
Albert,
Aye.
Miller,
Aye.
Weedman,
Aye.
and Nash.
Aye.
Okay, that puts us up to unfinished business. The first one is the continued discussion of ISB resolutions, which will be led by Ms. Nash.
Thank you, Mr. Wheatman. As a recap, at the last board meeting, we did cover the 2022 Resolutions Committee report. As a refresher, and for those who weren't able to attend, who are listening via live stream, annually, our CCSD board members collectively reviews all proposed changes and recommendations that is submitted via the the Resolutions Committee report to align on our voting posture. And then we, as a board, identifies a delegate to represent our interest in the upcoming assembly meeting at the III Joint Conference, which will take place this Saturday, November 18th at 10. I'm going to say 10 a.m. I believe it's 10:30, but I'm going to commit 10 to my brain. All right. So we have already had a lot of discussion about the 3 constitutional amendments, 3 new resolutions, and 5 amended existing resolutions. All right, so at this time, I will go through each just as a high-level recap, and then we can go around for our individual votes. Keep me honest, Mr. President. The majority of the board represented here today of the votes will be how our district is voted on Saturday. Yeah, he did. Yeah. So we can begin with the constitutional amendments. So the first constitutional amendment was around changing the term of office from 2 years. Well, the term of office shall be 2 years and serve no more than 1 term or until a qualified successor is elected.
The change from that was it used to be 2 one-year terms, and now they're saying
Right,
to
it was flip-flopped.
stop with the amount of elections. They'll just do 1 2-year term.
Correct. And then if we wanted just point of reference, we can go to page 11 in the 2022 resolutions report under section 4 elections. And that's where it strikes out the 1 to 2 years. And then instead of 2 consecutive 1 2-year terms, it's just 1. Did that make sense? That was a lot of, okay. All right, so Ms. Albert, can we start with you, your vote for this constitutional amendment?
I vote yes.
I'm sorry,
Or-
let me back up. Do we need to have any further discussion about it? Okay, all right, Ms. Albert.
Yes or aye, which is the appropriate? I guess
I'll take either.
Okay, yes.
Okay, Mr. LaCroy,
Aye.
Mrs. Braden,
Aye.
Mr. Wheatman. All right, Mrs. Miller. Tamika Nash, aye, and Dr. Mack was an aye. The next constitutional amendment is around replacing the position statements with, removing belief statements because there are new value statements that have been adopted. Okay. So we no longer need belief statements since we have the core value, the IASB core values. Any questions? All right. Mrs. Miller, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, Mr. Wheatman? All right. Dr. Mack was an aye. Mrs. Braden?
Aye.
All right. Mr. LaCroix?
Aye.
And Ms. Albert?
Aye.
And I probably should have said for the last one, for Constitution Amendment, the first one around election term verbiage, CCSD 46 will be voting yes. That was the majority. And for Constitutional Amendment number 2, around replacing or removing the belief statement, CCSD 46 will be voting yes. CCSD 46, that's a mouthful. I'm just going to say we will be voting yes. Okay. All right. The next constitutional amendment is with regards to removing the 8-day requirement, advance requirement to submit an appeal, with the rationale being that there was a modification to make appeals from the floor at the delegate assembly, if warranted. Any questions? Okay. Mr. LaCroix?
Aye.
Mr. Wheatman? Okay. Dr. Mack was an aye. Ms. Braden?
Aye.
Ms. Albert?
Aye.
And Ms. Miller?
Aye.
Okay. And Ms. Nash is an aye. All right. Then if we move over to our new resolutions, the first resolution was regarding the Miller ratio adjustment, increasing from 2 to 3 to allow districts to maintain healthier balances without fear of suit or legal a legal case being brought forward due to excessive accumulations. Okay, I will start. I am an aye. Mrs. Miller? Aye. Mr. LaCroix?
Aye.
Ms. Albert?
Aye.
Ms. Braden?
Aye.
Dr. Mack was an aye. Mr. Wheatman? Okay. We will be voting as yes for the Miller ratio. Okay. The next new resolution was around the alternative fueled school bus funding. Right, this is where the school district was essentially looking to have, and I can point us to page 13, where school districts was looking to advocate for additional funding to help create transitioning to zero or low emission school buses. And the rationale was that it's really important to do this, but the school districts really don't have the funds or the infrastructure to be able to do this. The resolution committee recommended a do not adopt for this one, indicating that there wasn't sufficient analysis to ensure that this cost could not only go to new buses in rural areas, but that there would be some degree of equity for other areas that experience challenges, namely rural and urban settings, would need to be considered, and they didn't feel like they had sufficient analysis to move forward with that. Okay. Nash is a is a yes. So the resolutions committee is saying do not adopt. I believe that we should adopt this because I think it's going to help to force legislators to start to look and find creative and innovative ways to move the needle on this. All
I would
right?
I just want to add too that I feel like there's all these other ones down in the amended positions that are about funding. And this is the only one where they're like, I just don't know how we're going to fund it.
Right.
Okay,
right.
well, we're funding all these other things down at the bottom.
Right, and that's their role, right, to advocate
out.
and find ways to
Yeah.
figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Not to sway anyone. And I'm sorry, I went right to my position. Any other comments or discussion on it?
I'm also going to vote yes for this
Okay.
because I like the idea of encouraging innovation. The more I'm learning about EV vehicles, I think we need to keep, I'm not against them, but I want to make sure that there is resources and that we do figure out ways to continue looking at low emitting or no emitting buses. So I'm
Okay. Mr. Wheaton? No. All right, Ms. Braden?
I'm a yes.
All right. Mr. LaCroix?
Yes.
Okay. Ms. Albert?
I'm a yes.
All right. And Dr. Mack was a yes. So our board will be voting yes to adopt this resolution. Okay. Moving on to the next new resolution, which can be found on page 14 around firearms, firearm dealer location. And you may recall during our last board meeting, our neighbor over in Mundelein who proposed this resolution came to speak to us about it. This resolution is essentially looking to expand the distance from 500 feet to 1,500 feet, where a firearm dealer could be located in relation to a school. Part of the rationale thinking that it could be traumatic for students as they're being transported to schools to see a firearm dealer in their community and or advertising. And there's concern with the increase of gun sales that these type of entities will start to become more prevalent in communities. Okay. The resolutions committee recommended to do not adopt this resolution. And they cited something specific around, being unclear, my word, but it was really like trying to frame, well, who all might fall under the definition of a firearms dealer. And then rather than change the distance, would it be more impactful to have a different statement about firearm advertising that would be more helpful? All right, so I will start. Any discussion on this one? Okay. I'll start with Mr. Wheatman. No. Okay. Ms. Braden?
I'm a no.
Okay. Ms. Albert?
I'm a yes.
All right. Dr. Mack was a no. Mr. LaCroix?
Yay.
Ms. Miller?
I'm a no.
And Ms. Nash was really struggling with this one. Because I'm concerned around the definition of a firearm. What's a firearm dealer as well? And I'm thinking about, like, as an example, Walmart sells firearms, right? If we had a Walmart that were to open, I don't know where they would open in Grace Lake, but if they could, maybe that big plot off of what is that, Center and 45. But in any event, I'm scrolling. Point being, that could be an income revenue generating entity for our community that sells firearms. Would that preclude them then? So that was my rationale, and I'll say nay as a result. Keep me honest. Hold on. What am I saying nay to? Help me. No, so I do.
The committee was a no vote.
Yeah,
So you're agreeing with the committee.
I'm agreeing with the committee because I'm unclear as to the scope of a firearm dealer. Thank you, team. Okay. Yeah, 5-2. So we are going to vote no on this resolution as a board. Good counting, Mr. Weedman. Sleeping on the job. Okay. The first amended resolution that we discussed previously was around capital grant funding for school buildings. So again, this is just ensuring that we have capital funds to address the shortage in classroom space and size just due to the growth in population, et cetera. So any questions or concerns about capital grant funds for schools or the criteria, because there's 4 components to it. So in order to qualify for the funding, one, it would depend on the percent of fully funded, the district's borrowing capacity, the district's EAV per pupil, and age of existing buildings. The resolution committee is recommending that we do adopt this. Discussion? Good. All right. Nash is a yay. Ms. Miller?
Yay.
All right. Mr. LaCroix?
Yay.
Ms. Albert?
Yay.
Ms. Braden?
Yay.
Dr. Mack is a yay. Mr. Weedman? D46 will vote yes on this resolution. For the next amended existing resolution is around school safety fund. So currently the verbiage is funding at the state level. This would expand it to ensure that they're advocating for funding at both federal and state level. Do we need to have any discussion about this? No? Okay. All right. Ms. Albert?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. LaCroix?
Aye.
Ms. Braden?
Thumbs up.
Dr. Mack is an aye. Mr. Weedman? Yes. Ms. Miller? Yes. And Ms. Nash is an aye. So the ayes have it. We will vote yes on this resolution. Okay. Moving down to the next amended existing resolution. This is involvement with candidates for public office. So the recommendation was to remove support of candidates, to give the, to ensure bipartisanship, if you will, of IASB in advocating for any candidates in the legislative process. Are there any points of discussion needed?
Can I just say what I think it is?
Yes.
So it sounds like our friends in Indian, yeah, sorry. I'm not reading the columns well. I apologize. I'm trying to see where this thing starts.
Indian Prairie School
Indian Prairie.
District
Okay,
204.
yep. Our friends in District 204 are
Yes.
saying that IASB should not be supporting certain candidates over others. That's what I've read it, because right now it says they will support those candidates who have demonstrated understanding and support for the principles of school management. And so the school district is saying, why would you evaluate individual candidates? And the committee is just saying, no, I think it's okay, without any really explanation. That was what was interesting to me. They're like, no, I don't think we should. Change that.
Analysis is more like, we made our position clear on this.
Yeah.
We're not gonna revisit that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, that's, I just wanted to, and the committee's recommending
Yes.
no, because they want to keep, they want to keep evaluating individual candidates.
They want to keep
Right? That's
evaluating
what they-
individual candidates.
Here,
Yeah,
you wanna
so
look at
here,
my-
so all right, I'll read it verbatim. All right. So, the Illinois Association of School Boards shall actively encourage and assist school board members to effectively evaluate legislative positions relative to public education as they affect the principles of school management to ensure the best education for public school students in Illinois. The rationale: as elected trustees of local public education, school boards and their individual members should be actively participating in the legislative process as it relates to school board operations and public education. IASB should encourage this involvement and assist in evaluating legislative positions. In its foundational principles of effective governance, code of conduct, and belief statement, IASB emphasizes the importance of elections remaining nonpartisan, as this leads to effective governance and consideration of the whole community and all students. IASB should not be involved in evaluating individual candidates. This amendment is based on the principle of nonpartisanship by supporting analysis of legislative positions rather than individual candidates. The Resolutions Committee analysis. The committee discussed the intent of the current position statement 3.02 in relation to the proposed amendment and felt the current language should remain. Very short and sweet.
I think it might be helpful if I tell you I intend to vote yay on this. And the reason is because I don't think that advocating for legislative candidates relative to public education is partisan.
Right.
So I think that, a candidate from either party can have what we would consider to be pro-public education positions, and advocating for them against an opponent that isn't partisan. It's strictly speaking based on that one criteria.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm a yay.
Yep. For that same reason, I am a yay.
Yeah, me too. I feel like anything that makes municipal positions nonpartisan and strengthens, in a time when partisanship is trying to infiltrate down to municipals, I think is important. So that's why I'm a yay.
Okay. Mr. Weedman? Still processing?
No, I read it a little more clearly and I heard other people's comments.
Okay. Ms. Miller?
I'm a yay.
Okay. Ms. Albert?
I'm a yay too.
Okay. Dr. Mack is a yay. The board will vote yay for this resolution. All right. The next amended existing resolution is around a mandates review committee.
Tamika, can I stop you for a second?
Yes.
I think I got us off on the wrong foot, actually. I really think that I do not want this resolution adopted for the reasons I did state. I think that the position statement should remain the same, that advocating for an individual candidate that possesses pro-public education positions is the right thing. So I say do not adopt this. Do not adopt the change.
Yeah, I think on the other half of that is where we said the request for policies that are happening up way above us, we don't want to start filtrating down into this level. This is hard enough as it is to sit on this board and be nonpartisan and keep politics out of it.
Yeah.
And keep focus on the kids. That's the way I look at it.
Okay.
To me, I don't want partisanship involved from the IA.
I don't think that having pro-education policies should be a partisan issue. So I'm a nay. Do not. I agree with the resolution.
Do you
committee.
agree with the resolution?
Can I play out? I think I'm still a yay, but can I play out Jason's point?
Okay.
So let's say there was a candidate, and this actually happened in the 90s when I was living in Southern Illinois. There was a candidate who homeschooled their kids and ran for the board on the platform of, I'm going to slash the district budget to benefit myself because I don't believe in public education. I want to homeschool my kids, and so I want to pay less in taxes, so I have more to pay, and there's not a voucher program, so I'm going to run, and my goal is going to be to slash the budget. And so that would be considered a candidate who did not espouse public education, and therefore that would be the IASB would say that's not a candidate that we would support as someone who is trying to be elected to a board in order to dismantle or diminish public education. Is that how what you're thinking about?
One school district wants IASB to stop advocating for individual candidates based on education or non-edu policies.
But
This district is saying, don't advocate for certain candidates, advocate for legislative positions instead.
Okay, I would like to legislate for positions.
So you're a yay. You're against the resolutions committee.
Good job. Spoken, spoken by a true former delegate.
Yes.
He's like the chief of staff of all delegates.
All right.
Okay. All right, we're good? We're moving on?
Yep.
We're moving on.
Okay. We're moving on to mandates. Mandates Review Committee. All right, so let's see. Our neighbors in Lake Forest brought this one forward. So essentially, it's calling for the creation of a committee on mandate review. So think about all the different mandates, rules, regulations that come down affecting local districts. They just want to make sure that there's a committee put in place, in my mind's eye, to just kind of review this and make it more efficient and streamlined out to the school boards. All right. Any
That and probably to try and get funding for the unfunded mandates, so you can get the unfunded mandates out.
Yeah.
So, because those are burdensome to any school district.
Yeah. The committee is recommending to adopt this amended existing resolution. Any discussion? Okay. Ms. Albert?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. LaCroix?
Yes, do adopt.
Ms. Braden? Yay. Dr. Mack is a yay. Mr. Wheatman?
Yes, please.
Ms. Albert? Ms. Miller? Sorry. I told you guys this feels like Friday. Like, I feel like a groundhog. This is like Friday, like two times
Yes.
over. Okay. And Nash is a yes. All right. So our board will be voting yes on this resolution. All right. And then last, thankfully, the last amended resolution that we are looking at is funding for school boards. I think this has come up before, in prior delegate assemblies, but financial contributions for school board elections. So essentially, you know, the goal here is to prevent school board candidates from soliciting, accepting, or receiving a donation or financial contribution from special interest groups or PACs. The resolution committee is recommending to adopt this amended existing resolution. Do we need discussion? Good. All right. Nash is a yes. Ms. Miller? Yes. All right. Mr. Wheatman?
That's an easy yes.
Dr. Mack is a yes. Ms. Braden?
Yes, please.
Mr. LaCroix?
Yes.
Ms. Albert?
Yes.
All right. Community Consolidated School District 46 will vote yes to adopt this resolution, amended existing resolution. And that concludes the Community Consolidated 2022 board vote for the Resolutions Committee report. That will take place on Saturday, November 18th at 10:30. I yield the floor, Mr. President.
Okay. Thank you very much for taking care of all that for us. Next is the 3-year priority construction timeline.
Okay, thank you. So in your board packets, you'll see a memo, and you will see a timeline of 3-year priority capital plan timeline. Just for completeness, we've included year 1, which is we've just completed it, the Frederick roof with the costs, the ADA bathrooms at Grays Lake Middle School, and a lot of the work that was put into Avon Center School, which included air handling unit, building automation system, unit handlers, and boilers, for a total of just over $1 million. So we are presenting to you, because you asked for it, a timeline of year 2. So we've got the Prairie View roof, the Woodview roof. We've also got an additional work which we're adding on here. It's a 10-year health life safety survey, which will be started in the summer of 2023 by our architect of record, by Wald. We've got the Grays Lake Middle School automation system, which is, we've been talking to you a lot about BAS. That'll be approved November 30th. We'll bring that to you. It's everything that we're bringing to you was already presented at the November and December $9.2 million. This is the detail of how we're going to be producing it for you to either approve as a board packet, which has been bid out by Wald, or is something that's being presented via a cooperative contract that doesn't need board approval. That doesn't need bid approval, but it needs board approval. Then we've got the Frederick and Park Campus building automation systems. That was pulled forward. It was originally scheduled for year 3, but based on where we're looking at timing of scheduling, lag times for where we're at in getting things ordered, that is now a year 2 project. And then going into year 3, we've got the Avon Center roof, which will be designed in May 23, bid approval in October 23 to start in June of 24, and the Meadowview work. So that completes the 1 through 3 years which we've presented to you, which totals $9.2 million. Adam would have had more stuff to talk about because he was the person who made a lot of changes on this in coordination with Trade and Wald. So I'll try my best to answer any questions you've got.
I don't really have a question. I just have a request going
Sure.
forward. All right, so we had a 3-year plan.
Yes.
We're through year 1. Can we add year 4 in so it stays in 3-year plan and then kind of go forward? And then if money comes available in there somewhere, if money comes available, we have a list of things, of projects that we could pull from to move into year 2 or move into year 3 and continue the list going forward.
Absolutely, we could have that. That conversation has not taken place with our architect. We do have, obviously, it's in here. If you were to look at there's a whole about 30 pages of all the work. So all the 36.7 million is in that book. There's nothing in here that's not in there because it's already been presented to you. What we've not done is do a detailed prioritization about when we're gonna, which buildings would be done first. So yes, we could do that.
The money tree starts growing.
Absolutely, we can design. Well, as much work as we can do in year 4. We start that.
If you do adopt that rolling 3-year view, if you could somehow color code the things that have been funded already versus what's not
Right.
funded. And then I imagine there might be a situation kind of like with the ESSER funds and CARES Act funds where there might be different tranches of funding. We'll have to
Yes.
start getting into a rainbow of colors eventually.
Yes.
But for the near term anyway, right, already funded in the 9.2 or not yet funded.
So the 36.7 that we're showing to you, that will be up for when we present this view for year 3, we will start to see things taken off. So because of the timing of this was all completed over the summer. That was being completed as well. We should start to see the work drop off and the reprioritization actually happen in all the documentation that we have, because that's how we keep track of it too. It's not just a document that exists in a budget. It's actually a living document. It's a working document that we work with
Something
with
dynamic.
Wald.
Okay. I was gonna ask a question you won't be able to answer, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. The Avon air handling unit, automation system, ventilators and boilers.
Yeah.
I know that building is among our oldest. Has there been a change in the learning environment, a beneficial change in the learning environment there? Is it the right temperature when it's supposed to be the right temperature? Things like that. So I know that you
don't
can't answer
know.
that, but I'd like to know the answer to that. Is the learning environment better from that investment?
Sorry, we'll have Adam answer that question at the next board meeting. Okay, we'll just do that through the superintendent's report.
Any more questions as the timeline is presented? Okay, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Next is new business, but there's nothing on the list for new business coming forward. So then we go to topics for future agenda items.
Yes, so the bulk of the next meeting on November 30th is actually going to come out of today's Finance Committee meeting. At our committee meeting today, we had some conversation and that came out of the 5-year projections about the potential of moving forward with a referendum in the coming years. And the Finance Committee didn't want to give direction specifically to the administration about moving forward with a referendum question on a ballot in the future. So we're going to come to the full board at the next meeting just to ask that. Just to ask you, do you want us to plan that? I will share that certainly the conversation at the Finance Committee made it very apparent that that was kind of the will of the group. And the reason I state that is because we also talked about the potential of hiring a referendum consultant. And so Chris Wildman will be doing some research on referendum consultants. And hopefully, well, Chris, I haven't even been able to speak to you since the Finance Committee meeting at 5:30. So is it realistic that you'll be able to get information about consultants between now and November 30th, knowing that there's Thanksgiving in the middle of that?
I will try.
Okay.
I'm identified them. I'm aware of at least 2 who I
Okay.
could reach out to.
Okay.
We'll see if we can get a response from either of them.
Okay. So we can have some conversation about it at the next board meeting, whether you're actually, whether we're ready with a full recommendation as to who it would be. We'll have to wait and see. Okay. Then there were 2 agenda items on today's Finance Committee meeting that we did not get to because we were having so much other interesting conversation about the other topics. And both of them really make sense to bring to the full board at the next board meeting anyway. One is student fees. So that's about the board last year having some interest in us looking at student fees differently. And there was kind of some circular conversation about that last year. We'd like to go back to that conversation and have the board tell us, what do you want us to investigate? So we're going to ask you that at the next board meeting so that we can then bring back more information at the following board meeting to have more discussion. And then also the dashboard for the financial dashboard for the website that is going to be completed soon. We look for more direction from the board as to what you'd like to be on that financial dashboard. So we'll ask you that at the next board meeting. That brings me to III. And I don't know if you want to have this conversation at the November 30th meeting or the December 14th meeting or even in January. So I'm going to review what we talked about recently in terms of how we would structure that conversation. Then I want to give you some more information about, actually first I'm going to give you some more information about December 14th. So with apologies, we acknowledge that there's a scheduling conflict on December 14th. Along with there being a board meeting here at Frederick, there's going to be a band concert at GMS. Folks are very apologetic that that happened, but it did happen. And so I know that we have at least 2 board members, right? One of them sitting right here, who have band students who quite likely will want to be at that band concert. So my first question is, do we have every reason to believe that we have a quorum otherwise? Is there anybody? It's Stephen and you. Yeah, is anybody else thinking they're not going to be able to be here on December 14th? Okay, that's great. So we can have a meeting. We're sorry you won't be there, and we're sorry that happened. So let me go back to III, because knowing we'll be missing at least 2 people on December 14th may help make this decision. So what we talked about during the board workshop last week, this was kind of a spin-off of some conversation we were having in relation to the pandemic, and it did make sense at the time. We ended up talking about some conversation that had come out of III a few years ago and wanted to make sure that we had a structured way of talking about the learnings that the board gathers at III. And so rather than it just being a during board report time where people just kind of say, well, this is what I learned, this is what I learned, we wanted to figure out what do we do with that learning. So we talked about structuring that conversation into 2 categories. What learnings and ideas did people come away with that would feed our strategic plan? So the plan's already in place. What have you learned that kind of feeds that? And then are there ideas or learnings that people think we should consider for the future that might be outside of the strategic plan? So I'd like to know when you want to have that conversation. We could do it at the next board meeting on November 30th. People might feel like, hey, that's just a week after III, and we got Thanksgiving going on, and I need more time to organize my thoughts. So we could do it on December 14th, or we can bump it all the way into January if folks feel like that's necessary. So what are your thoughts about that?
I'd rather say is wait until January.
Same. I don't want to miss it,
Right.
Right.
and I don't know that I'll have time. Yeah, there's no reason
Right.
to rush it.
Certainly, and what if what you learned at III was so compelling, you'll remember it in January, right? So maybe that'll help us get rid of the stuff that wasn't so important. Okay, so we'll do that. Let me just reorganize this. Okay, so so really all of the next board meeting, November 30th, is just going to be all of the everything to do with finances, because we have nothing else, unless you have something. Yeah,
I do.
Yeah.
So I had requested from Jim and Lynn that we have new representation at the state level, and so requested that we invite our new state senator and representative-elect in to introduce themselves, hear a little bit maybe about our thoughts on what they need to have in mind as they go to Springfield for the first time in January. So I did, Laura Dias is available to come on the 30th. Mary Lee Allen, who is a teacher, yay, D46 teachers.
she's no longer. She's not.
Right, but
Yeah,
she
but she
still
was,
teaches,
yes.
which is why she can't come.
Oh,
she
got it.
still teaches on Wednesday nights.
Oh, got it.
So, so she's a conflict. So we're gonna try to figure out a time when she can make it. That's not when she's in Springfield or when she's teaching. But Laura is confirmed for the 30th.
Okay. Okay, great. Anything else on the 30th? Okay. So moving on to the 14th, we will have the Frederick School Kindness Club coming to do a presentation. So we're excited about that. Dr. Chris Woke will be doing seniority reports for us. Amy Gluck will bring an approval for the Dreambox math program that she talked about earlier. And Chris Wildman will all together be continuing with that student fees discussion in December. January 18th, there's going to be a presentation about the new website. Yay, we're so excited. And we plan on a student fees action item, and then III, as we just talked about. And then all the way into February 1st, we'll have a presentation about our equity action plan. And then I just also wanted to mention that we have upcoming, but not yet scheduled, some presentations from a couple of student groups from Park School. So we're excited about that too, but we don't know when we'll do those yet. That's it for now.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
We've been waiting for the policy update. Has that come through?
So
yet?
it just came through. We
Wonderful.
just received it. We have not yet scheduled that policy committee meeting, but we're thinking we'll do it in actually, didn't we say probably the January 18th one? Yeah. Okay, let's just decide that. We're going to do policy committee on January 18th. And I know, Christy, you had requested being able to get to see those policies as soon as possible. So we'll get them out to you as soon as possible.
Great.
Not
Thank
to
you.
to everyone. Okay, so we'll do the policy committee.
On January 18th.
Yeah, January 18th. Okay, yeah, we just got those. Anything else?
So we've been talking about the next community cafe, which will be in April, probably mid-April. And this one is tied more directly to the strategic plan, specifically around outdoor learning spaces. So it would be helpful, while it's not until April, design starts now. So it would be helpful to put that on an agenda in the next 2 or 3 meetings. I think it might piggyback well off the equity audit update, if that's.
Sure. So that would be kind of planning. Can you give us a little more information about what the meeting would be?
So I'm going to want to know, the first 3 cafes have focused on relationship building, really just helping people come together and build relationships. So this next one will be tied more directly to the strategic plan, and it's a way for our board to understand the needs and wants of our district or our community more explicitly. But I need to know how will we use that information before I start designing, so that I design to get whatever we want. So if you want a report, if you want a presentation, if you want a list, however you want it, and I can give you more and would be better prepared when I know I'm talking about it, but that's generally what direction I'm looking for.
Does that information start to feed the kind of parking lot for the next strategic plan? Is that kind of how you envision? Like, why are you having that discussion now?
So Dr. Glickman and I have talked about it and felt it would be useful. And so I'm waiting on a little more information from her as well.
She's waiting for a date, and she's being very patient.
No,
So I
it's all
appreciate
good.
that.
It's all
Yeah,
good.
so we had a conversation about it because that's actually connected to our current strategic plan and the work for this year, actually, to assess our spaces, and also connected to the work that Wold will be doing for us. So we kind of need to figure out what's the whole kind of carousel of this in terms of what is the CEC work and what is the Wold work. So we have to have some more conversation about that piece. Okay. All right. Well, it sounds like we have a lot coming up.
Yeah.
I think that's it.
Busy.
Busy, busy.
Okay, any public comments? Okay. Do we have a need for a closed session? Nope. You lost your chance. Can I have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Second, did someone move?
Wait, who
I
moved?
beat you to second.
Who moved, I guess?
Wait, who moved and who seconded?
Braden second.
Nash and Braden, okay.
LaCroix was a distant third.
All right, LaCroix? LaCroix?
Cake?
Nash?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Albert?
Aye.
Weedman?
Aye.
And Braden?
Aye.